Hey folks, welcome back. So my name is Mara Hoslander, and today we're going to talk about responsive design and the ways that we define it in the design industry. So this is a multi-part video series where I cover different topics in responsive design. Um, so just as a heads up, there's probably some more videos here on my channel that you can reference. So let's actually talk a bit about responsive design and how to define it. So when we do research on Google or some other resources, I've found that the information is a little conflicting. So in some cases, we refer to responsive design as wholly owned by a UX designer or a design team. And in other places, we're looking more at technology or the engineering component of it. I would actually say that it should be a harmonious balance of both. So on the design side, we're really looking at creating a flexible design system that responds to different sizes or different devices. So this would be the responsibility of the designer to establish different patterns that work between the different devices fluidly. We're also looking at having designers apply these style guides based on the different operating systems to those products. So as an example, we'll use Facebook for this scenario. When we consider Facebook, they have a brand identity that they strongly identify with. So it's that dark blue with white kind of reverse graphics on it. When we look at Facebook on desktop, we have certain components that are used kind of globally. So we have this navigation bar, we have the logo in a certain place, we have icons that help explain the destinations in which you would go to if you were to tap on it. And similarly, we have those same paradigms for mobile design and tablet design. However, they look a little bit different, even though they behave the same. So for example, when I tap on when I tap on the little newspaper icon, I always see the design feed or perhaps a news feed of what's going on. And that behavior is the same across those different devices, but they just look different. And that's because of a responsive design system where we take the general philosophies and principles behind one user interface component and we apply it to another while making sure that it's still usable for that device. On the engineering or tech side, what we're really trying to understand is how it's being implemented. So how it's being engineered so that this design system behaves correctly. So with desktop, we have different affordances. So we look at different design components and they afford or they provide a way for you to interact with this content. So for instance, if I were to tap on it or click on a drop-down menu in desktop, it looks and behaves, it looks a little bit different than when you do it on mobile. So for instance, mobile might actually have a bottom sheet that comes up where you scroll up and down until you find the right content. But on desktop, you actually click to reveal and then you select it again. So with our technology partners, we want to create these flexible design systems so that they can easily build upon a UI kit that has been created for them to reuse, or provide them with detailed enough specifications where if they had to create one from scratch, they would be able to do so. And again, that's really a partnership between tech and design. I can't emphasize that enough, that it's not so much like one team usurping another team. With responsive design, it all needs to be a team effort. And in my interactive design class, we won't be coding, but we'll actually look at some of these components on the design side and creating specifications so that you can hand off these specifications to engineers to build. The goal ultimately of responsive design and between these two teams is to make sure that your products work consistently across multiple devices. So again, this is very customer-centric or user-centric. We're not designing based on our preferences or aesthetics or values. What we're looking at is making sure the product that we design is available to as many people as possible. So again, very much a partnership between tech and design. So when should you use responsive design? I think the oversimplistic answer would be always, but of course that's not as as easy to implement. It's easier said than done. So a couple of tips on when to approach this conversation with your product team or engineering team is when your product is expected to work across different devices. So here it could be multimodal, meaning there's different ways and different methodologies in which people want to interact with or access the same content. So for a website like eBay, you may want to be able to access all of the content on eBay without any deprecation of features across all of these devices. So you want to make sure that the experience is consistent enough with buying and selling on eBay, where they can do it on their phones or they can do it on their desktops or tablets. Responsive design is also a great way to save money, at least on the design side, and a couple of points where I can identify on the engineering side. So here with responsive design, we have a philosophy, could be good, could be bad, that this is kind of a one size fits all design aesthetic. So here we're designing components, of course, and individually scaling it for different devices and different breakpoint sizes. But again, we're creating this brand system or this visual system that can be used everywhere so that the look and feel of your product can look the same on mobile, it can look the same on desktop and tablet. It could look the same on mobile web as it does within a native app itself. So it's a great way to save money. Of course, it's a time investment upfront, but I think in the long term, it actually saves more money because these components are designed as a family. So if there needs to be an aesthetic refresh or rebranding, that's actually not as complicated as it could be. You can use these different shared components within Sketch or Illustrator or Photoshop so that when you create a design in one place and you update it, it actually updates all the content globally. It also saves money when you want to ensure the compatibility of these products. So if we were to work from a UI kit that's been built for the most recent operating system, so we could take iOS, for example, all of the operating systems that run your iPhone and iPads. We're looking at creating this design system that works for those platforms, and as they continually release updates, your designs should degrade gracefully into those new patterns. I would say very rarely has there been an entire user interface overhaul. Of course, the aesthetics has changed, the typefaces has changed, but the general content and location of these elements have remained consistent. So the navigation bar has always been on the bottom. The browser, the little browser field's always been towards the top. So some of these principles should persist as we get continual software updates, but should also persist across different apps. So there's not a lot of reinvention that is required. And as I kind of pressed on a little bit earlier, of course, responsive design and the principle of making it work across multiple devices means that it's more accessible to people of not only different abilities, but people that have different types of devices and how connected they are on the internet. So we have this concept in sociology and anthropology called the digital divide, where we look at a place like the United States where we think everyone has high-speed internet access and everyone has access to laptops and cell phones that have been designed in the last few years, but that's simply just not the case depending on the school district, the income level, where they live, etc. So high-speed internet is not available for all people who live in the United States. We're looking at really the availability of utilities and the different companies that set up shop. So we have, again, this kind of digital divide where we need to use our designs to make sure that they're actually accessible by everyone on that spectrum. So in this case, responsive design becomes even more important. Something that I want you to take away from all these videos and all of the reading that you end up doing on responsive design as you do your research work is that responsive really just means flexible. We sometimes get caught up in jargon in the industry. Of course, I think every industry kind of suffers from that. But if we wanted to simplify our language, responsive is really just equivalent to flexible. So flexible just in the way that it's designed, but also implemented. So here, the flexible design system would respond and adjust to different screen sizes. So it should, again, look kind of the same that it does on mobile, and just kind of stretch out a little bit and refactored so that it works properly on tablet. And again, stretched and refactored for how it should look on desktop. It reuses a lot of the common design elements, so not only branding, but also colors and typefaces. We wouldn't have a different look and feel on mobile that we would on tablet, unless it's a different company or unless there's a really good reason to break those patterns. A flexible design system also allows us to be able to translate your product into multiple languages. So as students, we focus a lot on designing in English, because of course that's the language that we use in class. But as you scale your design portfolio and the different types of products you use or design for, you will be creating products that will be consumed by people all around the world. So that could mean that your product has a translation function, or it could mean that you're actually publishing products in those native languages for people who speak it and also read it. So keeping in mind that those design systems can be used flexibly, not only to accommodate the visual component, but also languages as well. A flexible design system is also easily editable. So I talked just briefly a little bit earlier about the shared components that you can create across your design file. With making them editable, you can very quickly implement a visual upgrade or design updates so that when you kind of change content in one area, it actually reflects everywhere else. And I think that's also reflected again in the product development process, where these flexible design systems and components make it easier for your engineers to implement these kind of global changes based on the product design that you've put together. So responsive design is very important. Again, it helps cut down on the design time because you're actually designing one system for use everywhere. There's a little bit of a there's a upfront cost of it, but I think over the long run, it actually saves a lot of design time. So there's not a lot of rework based on new device releases or new operating system upgrades. It reduces the amount of work necessary to fit the design into different screen sizes, especially if you're not creating different screens and assets for every single device. So you don't create a design for iPhone 6 and iPhone 8 and 8 Plus and 10 and so forth. You're creating a system where this is what it looks like on an iPhone, and these are the dimensions at which they kind of reform and take on a different look based on the content that is required for that device. So it should cut down on being able to create assets for different screen sizes. Another inherent benefit of responsive design is that you only have to train your customers or your users once. Now, chances are they inherit some of this usage knowledge from their operating system already. So once you figure out how to use an iPhone app, you should pretty much know how to use different iPhone apps on your phone. Similarly, if they were to use your app, again, let's go back to the example of Facebook. If you know how to use the Facebook website, then chances are you know how to use the tablet, you know how to use the mobile interface, because they've used the same cues, not only visually, but from an interaction standpoint across these different devices. So our next topic will be managing the responsive design process. So come back.